Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 6 of the Data Import Manager. I've got a brand new training for you this time to include filters so that we can filter out data that we're importing simply by entering some commands, entering greater than or less than on dates or amounts or any type of filter you want, and then go ahead and clicking on the run import. We're going to see it run even on multiple sources, and then automatically it's going to filter that data inside our new destination. I've got a lot to show you in this training. I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining us today. I do appreciate it. We're now on part 6 of the Data Import Manager. And just to review, in part 1, we have covered the data source. And I'm going to include all these links down below, parts 1 through 5, along with this free workbook in the description below. So if you go ahead and click on the links in the description, you can download this free. You can also view the previous videos if you have not caught them yet. We've got part 1 on the data source. Part 2, we covered the destination. Part 3, we covered mapping data. And of course, part 4, we did the run import. In part 5 last week, we covered dynamic sources where we could have a single source or multiple source based on certain criteria, certain files that either contain, start with, end with. So we covered that in last week. And this week, based on some requests, we have added now filtering. Now, in case we don't want all of the source data to make it into our destination, perhaps we want to filter it by a date, by an amount, by a number, even by text. We can do that even if let's say product text, we only want to have items that end with a specific text, item that contain a specific text, or start with. We can do that just by clicking on these buttons. And these buttons are dynamic based on the type. So you notice when we click on a text or general based, we're going to get starts with, ends with. When we click on a date or a number, perhaps we're going to get less than or greater than, because it automatically knows what type of field it is, and we're going to display those buttons dynamically based on the type of field. So it's going to be really exciting. This is really going to be powerful. We're going to cover this in part 6. In part 7, we're going to probably add the ability to create templates, so we can create multiple templates so that if you like everything the way you just have it here, based on the filtering data, based on the source and destination columns, we can save that as a template and then just pull it up. So we're going to put that probably right up here in part 7, be able to save templates. In part 8, we're going to probably make this reoccurring so that we can automatically get reoccurring imports so that it can run by itself on its own without even touching it. So we got that to cover in part 8. And then maybe we'll go up to part 10. Really depends on you, on your suggestions, your comments, your requests. I like to build things as a team effort. It's not just me here. It's all of us combined together. That's why I always appreciate your support, your likes, and your comments. They really help out in making these something that everybody can use. So I do appreciate that. If you do like these free videos, I've got a couple amazing products. First of all, in just a few short weeks, we've got a mentorship program. We're going to be creating an amazing accounting application. I'm working very hard on that. Just did the sales video, and then should be launching that very, very soon. That will be a monthly type of subscription where I create videos for you each and every week. Everything you need to create recurring income using and creating your own Excel application. So that's going to be great. Can't wait to show you that. And of course, if you do like to support us, if you like these workbooks, I've got 100 of those in as one zip package you may like. Just go ahead and click the link below. That's just $37, all 100 workbooks, and that covers everything. So it's a great chance if you want to pick that up. We also have the Ultimate Resource Guide, where we have 1,000 specific resources in there, including 100 PDFs, 100 utilities and add-ons. We've got 100 YouTube channels, all based on Excel. So if you love Excel, you will love the Ultimate Resource Guide. And of course, our dashboard course. That's incredibly, hundreds and hundreds of people are graduating from that and getting brand new freelance jobs based on what they're learning and how to create these single-click dashboard. That's a 15-hour masterclass on how to create the most amazing dashboard you've ever seen. So I've got that a $50 discount run right now. So I don't know how long that's going to be up, but you might want to grab that. I'll include all those links down below. All right, let's get started with this training. So basically the idea is this used to be a one single column where we had the first row of data, but now I've split it using that final extra column that we have here in this area. We do have one available here, but I don't know if we're going to get to that. We'll use that maybe a little bit later on. But right now, so we have the ability to import it. And so what I want is when we map data, of course, it's all going to be cleared out. But I want to give the user the ability to filter out. So that means only import data that meets certain criteria. So for example, if we want only to import, or I should say import specific data based on certain criteria, a certain filter, we can do that. Let's say we want to create only purchase dates less than the 10th of January. So we can do that, and all we have to do is put in the date and then just put in less than. And as soon as we click run import, it's going to import multiple sources because I've got multiple sources selected here. And we'll see now everything now is actually less than the 10th. So every item that was imported is less than the 10th. So we have that. That's a great, I'm going to show you how we do that. We're going to use advanced filters for that, and we're going to use a temporary destination and then copy that over. So basically what I want to do is, and I've got, this works on multiple sources, but this is a dynamic source. If we're just doing one source, that would also work just as well. We can remap that, do the same thing, and less than, we could just do 110 and then click on the less than, and it's going to be the same. And we'll see automatically in the destination here, we have automatically those, just the data that's less than the 10th of January would be imported. So it's a great way to do that. And I want to show you exactly how we did that. So let's get started with the training, and we'll go ahead and close out this destination file. So that we have a temporary data, and I'll show you what that's all about in just a moment. And so let's go back to the map data, and we'll start out with just these buttons here. So these buttons appear dynamically, and I basically have 3 different shapes here. And it's just basically 3 different rectangle shapes, each assigned a different macro. And I have those grouped, right? So this particular group is a text-based group. This group will show up when we have a general or when it's nothing, right? So general and general is going to show up. But when we have a percentage or a number or a currency, we're going to have a different group show up. So this group, the text-based group for tag used on text or general, is, I've given the name called text filter group, text filter group. So that those 3 buttons are named text filter group. And the other one, based on the whether it's a number or currency or amount, that's going to be called number filter group. So I've created just 2 button groups. This group has 2 different shapes in there that have been assigned to different macros, and this group has 3 different shapes that have been assigned to macros. So if we right click one of those buttons and we click assign macro, we will see that the macro that's been assigned to this is called add filter text starts with. And then if, again, we'll take a look at this one and we click assign macro, and we're going to see that this one has been assigned to add filter ends with, and we've got another one that says add filters contain, right? So we have those macros that have been assigned, and I want to show you what we're doing in those. But first of all, we also get this button group to show up when we click those kind of nicely, but when we click off it, it disappears. So when we click off it, it disappears. How do we get it to do that? Well, that's on a selection change in our VB. Remember, when we're selecting something, then we want something to happen, not when we actually make a change. So what I want to happen is I want this button group when I select anything in here, but not here. Why not here? Look, even though it's in the right column, why not? Because there's no data here. So I really only wanted to say 2 conditions. When a user makes a selection in column F, and the other condition is when there is actually a value in the same row in column D. So make sure that D has a value and that they've selected an F. If D doesn't have a value, it's going to disappear. So that's in the selection change under the developers. We're going to go into that and take a look at that and just see how we did that. So into the developers tab we go, Visual Basic, and then we're going to look at for on sheet, data import. This is the sheet we're making the changes on, right? On sheet, because we're doing something on the sheet. We're making a selection change. This would be for a change on the worksheet. When we actually make a change to a cell, we're not making a change to a cell, all we're doing is selecting it. So that's called selection change. Worksheet selection change, because we're making a selection change. And remember, there's 2 conditions. two conditions. One condition is if a user selects anything in F65 through F164. The actual line in the VBA, the command is if not intersection target range is nothing. When you see nothing and not, they cancel each other out. Two negatives cancel each other out, become a positive. So basically you could read it if the user makes a selection in this range here, and there's a second condition. Remember, there's two conditions. And D and the target row means D in the row must not be empty. So those are two conditions. One condition here, D must contain a value. Second condition here, the user must have selected inside column F between 65 and 164. If those two things happen, we want to do something. What do we want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to record the row. What row did the user select? And I want to record that and put it in B1. B1 is going to, because I need to know, if I need to know what row to display, I need to know what row the user selected. So B1, if we slide over, we're going to see that B1 is going to record that row number. So as we selected, B1 changes. So that's the first thing VBA does. It's going to put that row number right into B1. What is it going to do next? Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine what type of field is it. Is it a general or is it a number? If it's a general, it's going to be text-based. And where do we keep that? We keep track of that right here. So what I want to do is I want to look in H and whatever the target row, whatever B1 is, B1, whatever B1 is. And what is this? If it's a general, then I want to show the text base. If it's a date, or if it's a currency, or if it's a percentage, or if it's a number, if it's any of those things, then I want it to show this group. So we're going to show two different groups of buttons based on the values right here. So let's continue on with our code. If range H and the target row equal general, then what are we going to do? Then first of all, I want to make sure that the numbers are hidden. I don't want to show the number group, right? Number group is going to be used for numbers. And since we want to show the text. The next thing I want to do is I want to run a macro called data map show text filter. And we're going to go over that macro in just a moment. Display text filter buttons. Otherwise, it's a number, right? If it's not general, else, otherwise, I want to hide the text-based group. I want to make sure that's hidden. And then I want to run a macro called data show number filter. So that's it. Else, what does this else mean? It means if the user has selected something in these two conditions, selected here and there's a value, then do all of this. But what if they don't? What if they select outside? Then I want to make sure that both of them get hidden. What does that mean? Well, if they've selected in here, I want to show something. But what if they select outside, or what if the conditions aren't true? If they select outside, I want to hide this. I want to hide those buttons. I don't only want them to appear when we're actually selecting. So in that case, I want to hide both groups, regardless of whether it's the text button group, whether it's the number filter group, or the text filter group here. I want to hide both of those, or any one of those, automatically. So that's important. So that's what we're going to do. So if they've selected outside or anything other than those two conditions, hide the groups. That's why we have else. Other than the filter selection, hide both groups. So these two lines will hide both of those groups. So that's why I have this else. Okay, so we know exactly how. Now we just want to get into the macros and take a look at the data show text filter and the data map show number filter. So we can look at those into the data mapping filters right here. So we've got a new module called data mapping filter. And these two macros are pretty simple. We want to show the number filter and show the text filter. They're both very, very simple. We'll go over them. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure B1 value does not equal empty. If it does, exit the sub. I need to know the row, right? That's very, very important. We need to know the row. So if B1 is empty, we don't know what row to display it on. So that would have to exit out of the sub. So the first thing we want to make sure that B1 does have a value. Next up, we can assign a variable to that row. We've determined map row to be long, and then we can set that map row to B1. So that's going to be our variable, our whole number variable, and it's going to tell us the row number. So we know that map row is a row number. So moving forward, we can just use the map row. Then we can say with shapes, right? Remember, I've shown you this group of shapes, number filter group. What are we going to do with it? Well, I want to display that. I want to display it, but I also want to position it. I want to position it exactly based on the column G in the macro on the left and column G and the macro on the top. And then what I want to do is I want to move it up a little bit. Increment top negative would be higher. A positive would be lower. So that what I want to do is I don't want to, if we were to, let's take a look at this. If we were to comment that out, it would then display right here. You see the number filter? It would display, I want it to display centered, right? I want it to center. I don't want it to top. I want these two buttons to like straddle right in the center. So that's why I want to move this group up. I want to move it up just a little bit like that. So that's why we have the increment top -15. So that's going to move it up a little bit. And that's basically it. Then I want to head the command line to show that. I want to show it. It may not be shown, so I want to make it visible. First, I want to position it, then I want to make it visible. I don't want to make it visible first. I want to position it first here with these 3 lines. Then with this 4th line, I want to make it visible. Then end with would be for the with the shapes, and end with would be for the sheet. So the first width would be for the sheet, the second width would be for the shapes, and then we close that loop. All right, so this is the same exact thing for this filter, except we're just going to make this one text filter group. Everything else is pretty much the same, except we're showing a different group. So that's it. So that's how we show those dynamically based on that. So when we move it up, we can see that it's automatically shown here. All right, I think for the number, maybe -5 would be, we don't need it that high up. So let's take a look at -5. If we do the number filter -5, I really want it to straddle that. So when we put it up, we want it to, that's pretty good. So it's right in the middle now. And so now what I want to do is I want to use less than or greater than. If there's a value here, if the user types in a value, I want to add the less than, or I want to add the greater than, but I want to make sure that anything else that's there is replaced. The same thing for starts with or ends with. If the user says, oh, they put a value in here and they want to put starts with, I want to make sure that it starts with, and I put the wild card, the asterisk at the end, which means it's going to start with 00 and then it can end with anything. Or if I click ends with, that means it would be start with anything and end with 00. And then contains would be the wild card on both sides. I mean, it could start with anything and it could end with anything, and it's just going to contain 00. So that's going to allow us to use those wild cards in our filter. So what I've done is I want to assign macros to these. Basically what I want to do is if a user clicks starts with, I want to take away any type of asterisk that might be there. I want to remove those, and then I want to add the asterisk at the end. Same thing with ends with. I want to take away any asterisk that might be there and then add one at the beginning, and contains the same thing. Take away any and just add them both at the beginning and end. So we're going to use the replace in VBA, and the same thing here. If there's less than, if we click greater than, I want to make sure to remove any less than or greater than symbols or any asterisks just in case there's any there, and only add the greater than. So we're going to do just that, or less than. So I want to do that with a few macros. So let's go ahead and see exactly how we did that. If we also, in our data mapping filters here, if we scroll down, we've got a few different macros. Starts with, ends with on text, and we have text contains. Then we have number less than and number greater than. So we have 5 different macros. Remember, we got 5 different buttons. So we've got 5 different macros, and let's go through them. They're almost all identical except for a few small differences. So of course we have to define the map row. We need to know that. That's important because I need to know what row the user is, what row we're going to make changes to the value. I need to know what row. In this case, it would be row 68. So we need to pull that 68 right from B1. So that's very important. So we are going to also dimension the filter as a string because that's going to be the text with sheet 1. What do I want to do? We're focused on sheet 1, not any other sheet at this point. So if B1 value, that would be the map row. We need to exit out of that because if there's no value there, we just need to go because we'll get a bug if it's empty. All right, next up, we can define the map row as in B1, and then we'll do a check. If F1 and map reveal empty, then exit this up. I want to make sure there's actually a value in F. If there's no value here, I don't want to do anything, right? There's less than or greater than, but if the user puts in a value, then we can go ahead and add less than or greater than or whatever. This is a date field, so that's going to be 110. Let's see, like that. So again, same thing here, less than or greater than. So only if there's a value in the cell do I want to make changes. If there's no value, then I don't want anything to happen. So keep that in mind. So that's why we have that line of code. If f in the macro value equals empty, then do what? Exit the sub. We don't want to do anything. All right, next up, we can assign the filter by, that's a string, to, assuming that there is, of course, a text or number in the field. F in the macro, that's going to be the filter by text. We're going to put that into a variable there. It's going to be a little helpful. Then what I want to do is I want to remove any asterisk or any less than or any greater than. I would remove all of those that might be there just so it's cleared. I just want the value by itself. No, because we're going to assign it. The next item the next line of code we will be assigning it. So this replace, I want to remove any asterisks, I want to remove any less than, and I want to remove any greater than. And I want to replace them. I want to replace any asterisk with empty space with nothing. I want to replace any less than with nothing, and I want to replace any greater than with nothing. So this one line of command will just basically clean the text, removing any remaining wildcards or less than or greater than, remove any previous filtering characters. So that's going to help us. Then once we have the string by itself, we can then add f and the macro value equals whatever the filter by and the asterisk, because this is going to be starts with, so we want it to start with, and then it can end with anything, which is the wildcard here. So that's going to help us when we do our filtering. Now it's almost exactly the same with ends with, except the only difference is in this case we're putting the asterisk in the beginning and ending it with the filter by, also replacing the same field, so there's no difference there. And then of course the contains is just almost the same, except we're adding the asterisk before and after. So that's all we're just doing, adding it, because we want to let the import know that it can start with anything and it can end with anything, but it must just contain whatever the user has entered in the filter by. So that's it for the contains. And for the less than and greater than, almost exactly the same, except we're adding less than here, the filter by, or in the greater than, we're adding greater than. So those 5 macros are almost all duplicate except for the ending line right here. That's pretty much it. Just the last line. So those 5 macros, so we can see how we do that. And each one of them have been individually assigned to those buttons as I have shown you. So that is going to allow us to do the filtering, great. But that doesn't actually run the import. When the import's running, we now have to take this data. So what do I want to do? All right, let's just say we have a single source of data. And let's say here's our source data. So here's our source data. So what do I want to do? I want to take this source data and I want to run it through an advanced filter based on whatever the criteria is. So let's just use a simple one. Let's clear all this out. Let's remap the data. That automatically clears it out. And I just want a simple data, let's say 110 and let's say less than. Okay, so we have that little. So basically I want to import all of the data that's where the purchase date is less than January 10th, 2009. Less than that date. So I want to import that. So what do I want to do? I basically want to run an advanced filter on our source data, and I want to look for any purchase date that's less than January 10th. And so it would be just these items right here because it's actually sorted. So I want to run that advanced filter based on that date, but I really don't want to run it on this source sheet. I really don't want to touch the source sheet. Maybe you have other data here, so we don't really want to touch it. So what I want to do is, and I don't want to run it on the destination sheet because I want to keep that destination sheet just for the destination data. So what I'll do is I'll use I'm going to use a temporary data sheet right here. This is our import manager. So I'm going to take a sheet, just an empty sheet right here, clear it out, and run the advanced filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, through VBA, I'm going to take all of the product, including the headers. I'm going to take all this data and I'm going to just copy it over into our temporary sheet right here. I'm going to put it right here. Then what I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter. So I'm going to copy all of those headers over and I'm going to copy the filtering, and then I'm going to run an advanced filter, and then I want the results to show up right here. Then I'm going to take all of these results here and I'm going to bring that into the destination file. So let's run it and we'll see exactly how that works when we go into the data import manager and just click run right here. All right, so now we see, we'll click on the destination and we see all of our, and here's our destination, our new destination file. all of the data, just the data from less than the January 10th has been imported. It's a little bit complicated within the code, but the simple thing is, let's just go over here. All I'm going to be doing is taking the source data, copying it over to a temporary sheet in our import manager right here, copying it over here, putting all of the criteria in right here, so all the headers, and then whatever information the user has put in for the filters, putting it in here, and then bringing it over and then using the results here. So now let's add one more filter just so you can see. Let's add a price of greater than, let's say less than 40. Less than 40, that's going to return just a few. So when we add that into there, that other filter right here, less than 40, we can put a purchase amount, 40, and then less than. And now we run the import. We have to close out the destination first because it's open. Okay, so you see that's just the destination. Here's our results. Here's our destination. It just hasn't, it's book 21 because our destination, it's telling us, we can't save our destination if it's open, right? We have an old destination. So if I close this, it'll allow me to do that. Okay, so we see now we have less than the 10th and less than 40. So we see the filter, and if we look into the attempt data, we see the same thing here. We see all of our original data right here. We see our criteria. Now our criteria contains two different filters, and then our results would go here. Then we take our results and we copy them over into our destination. Okay, we'll close this out. We don't need that. Okay, so we've got that. And so that is how we do it. So that's how we do it. And we're going to do that both in whether it's a dynamic workbook. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean whether the source is dynamic, whether we're using a single workbook or whether we're using multiple workbooks based on a criteria. So it's going to work for both of them, but let's just stick with the single workbook so we can show you now, but the code is pretty much the same. We'll go over it. Okay, so just to review, we're going to take this filter data, we're going to bring it over and use an advanced filter. Advanced filter, we're going to use this temporary data sheet to do all of our filtering for us. Once we get the results, we're going to copy these results and bring them into our destination. So that's it. So let's go over that and see just how we did that. Okay, so let's go back into the VBA, and then we'll take a look. Now we're going to be focused on the static macros here. Now we're going to be focused on the importing. Remember the import, we've already been over this, how we import, but we've made a few changes over it. And basically, let's just go through this really quick, not the entire macro. We're going to go slowly over the part that, just to review. So we're going to focus on sheet 1. We're going to make sure the data mapping has been done. We went over that. We're going to get all of our source workbook information from here in these. We went over that. Going to get all of our destination workbook information. But now we've added a brand new if-then statement. If we look down here, check for data filters. Everything else we've been over. So we're going to add the headers. Up until this point, I'm going to add the headers to the destination. So that's been done. Now we're focused just on the data. So I've got an if-then statement right here. If what I want to do is I need to know if any filters have been added. How do we check if filters have been added? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to count. I'm going to do a count A, count the text just like we did. And if there's any text in here at all, then that means a filter. So the way we can check for text is using count A. So I'll count A, just simply if we were using equals, count A, same thing here, just like this. Count A, so we know, so if we go all the way to the last row using the same we're going to do in the VBA, if this value is greater than 0, we know that the user has added text, some type of text in here. Then we can assume that we should do filters. If not, then we can we can skip the step where we add the temporary data. So we can skip that. And also our source data, if we're copying into the destination, our source data is going to come from here, the results. But if there's no filters, our source data is going to come from here, straight from our source. This is our source. So we have to know where our source is coming from. So it depends on if there's a filter or not. So we can use that. Let's take a look at that back into the so we're going to use the count A, and I do that in the VBA code. So we can use the worksheet function, application worksheet function, count A. What are we going to counting? Well, we're going to focus on remember, we got multiple workbooks here. So we're focused on our import workbook. That's this workbook right here. That's this workbook here. So we're going to work on those. We're going to what range the data import manager. That's the sheet that we're focused on. And what range? Starting at F65 to F in the last map column. That last map column right here, last map column is here. So we determine, we use another count A to get the last map column. So in this case, it's 72. In this case, it's 72. So we know we're going to count all the way from F65 through F72. If it's greater than 0, it means the user has added text. Then in that case, the user has assigned filter. Then we need to do all of this, starting here, going all the way down until you see the else. So we're going to add all of this code. Is going to run our advanced filter, get our data, and put our data in. Otherwise, else, no filters. This part we've already went over. Then all we're going to be doing is copying data directly from the source into our destination. So else, but if not, if there is filters, we need to use our temporary sheet, bring in the source data here, create some advanced filters here based on the filters that the user has set here, get our results here, and bring those results into the destination. So that's what we're going to do. So that's what we're going to focus on right now within the code. So we're focused on this part right here, assuming that there is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, the user has added filters. Then what I want to do, the first thing I want to do is with the import workbook, with the sheet's temporary data, I want to clear all the cells, clear all the contents. So what I want to do is just basically select and click delete. So clear all that. It's all temporary data. We don't need any of that. It's just for when we're importing it. So it doesn't matter. We don't need that. So there's nothing else other than temporary data. So that line of code simply just clears it out. So that's what that line of code is. The next up, what I want to copy over the source data to the temporary data sheet, just the source data. So I want to take this source data, including the headers, and basically, like copy and paste, we're going to do value to value and bring it over into our source and put it right here, starting at A1. Just bring it right in here. So that's what that line of code is going to do. Now we're ready to go. The range import workbook sheets temporary data, that's the data that we want the values in, starting at, this is a range, meaning we need 2 different cells, a starting cell and an ending cell. So our starting cell is 1, 1. That's A1. We're using cells, we could use range A1. 1, 1. So that's the first row, the first column, which is A1. That's our first. But what about our last one? Our last one, again, also import, of course, sheets, temporary data. We know we have to know the total import rows plus 1. That's the total number of rows. Where do we get total import rows? That's somewhere up here. We've already determined. Let's take a look at that. Total import rows right here equals F16 value. We've determined that before. When we run our source, we already know how many rows we're going to be importing on our fixed. So we know how many rows. So that's going to tell us how many rows, but how many columns. We also have total import columns, which is simply the last source column minus the first source column plus 1. That's going to give us the total columns that we need to import. So that's going to set the last part of our range, the last column, the last row. So that's what I need when we copy over the data. I need that last column, last. So here it is here. So we are going to say the total import rows plus 1. We're going to add 1 to the end because we are including the headers, so we need to include the headers. So the number of rows plus 1 because we're going to definitely. And then the total import columns. So the total import columns, all the data plus the header, and then the number of columns. What does that equal? It equals the range of the source workbook, the first row of data minus 1. Why minus 1? Because I want to include the headers. This is our first row of data in our source, would be 4, right? But minus 1, I want to make sure we bring in the headers. So in other words, it would be 3. So that's why we have minus 1. So that gives us our header there. And then next up, let's pull that up. So we have that plus the first source column. The first source column, that's the first part of the range here, the first part of our source range. What's the last part? What's the last cell? The last cell of our source is the last source row and the last source column. So that basically is going to take our data from the source and bring it directly in. Let's run this and we'll automatically get our new temporary data. It's already back in here. Here it is back in. I just cleared it out. Now it's back in because I ran the macro. So all we've done up at this point that we've gone through the code is bring it. Our first, it equals. So all we did is basically take this data and place it all directly from our source, which is here. So we just copied that over from here to here. Next up, what I want to do next is I want to skip 2 columns, and then I want to place the headers again. I want to place those headers right here in our criteria. I want to place those right here. So that's what we're going to do next in our code. So let's do the next line of code. So we copy over the source data. Now we're going to add in the criteria. So let's add in that criteria. So we have the import temporary data. We have row 1. So I want to add in the criteria. Remember, we're starting in row 1. Why row 1? Right here, row 1. So I want those headers in row 1. What column? I want it in the last column plus 2 and start that. That's what I want to do. Start it there. I want to just skip 2 columns over. So total import columns plus 2. That's where I want those headers to start. That's where's it going to end? It's going to end also in row 1, right? Those headers are going to end in row 1. Plus, it's going to end up the total import columns plus the total import column plus 1. Total import columns plus the total import columns plus 1. So that's going to give us our last row. What is that going to do? That's going to give us it right here, which is right here. So it's total import columns plus 1 right here. That will give us our range. But what does that equal? It equals what? Let's look it over. It equals, move it over here. Let's bring this a little bit so you can see it. Bring this a little more. So we're copying the headers. So now I want to do is I want to copy the headers from the total import columns right here. So starting range 1, A1, all the way to the last column. What does that mean? All that means is we're taking this data starting in 1, all the way to the import columns. So we're saying this range equals this range. All we're doing is pasting the values right here, just basically copying and pasting them over. So that's what we're doing with this line of code right here. So just copying, that's all this copies the headers right here. Now what do I want to do? So now we've copied the headers over. Now what I want to do, I want to copy in the criteria, the changes that the user, the filtering data that the user has requested. So let's pull that. So next up, what I want to do is I want to copy this. I want to copy it like this. Then what do I want to do? I want to paste it into here, but I don't want to paste it, but I want to transpose it right here. I want to paste special like that. Okay, but without the formats. So that's all I want to do is transpose it so that the filters make it in there. So the columns becomes rows. The rows become columns. So that's what we're going to do, but within VBA, and we're just going to do the values, not the formats. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to copy it, F65 to F in the last map column. In this case, it's 72. We're going to copy that. Then I want to paste it. Where do I want to paste it? I want to paste it, the import, to row 2. Remember, our headers went in row 1. Our filters are going to go in row 2. I want it in row 2 here, row 2, not row 1, row 2. So I want to paste it, and I want to paste it right here, but all the way over and transpose it so that our rows becomes columns. So we can do that right here. Paste values, not the formats. Transpose equal true. That's all we need to do. Just the values, not the formats. And paste values, and that is going to get all of our filters there. Okay, great. Now we have our source data. Now we have our filters data. Now we're ready to run our advanced filter. And again, all we're doing on the advanced filter is we're going to take our last row data. We're going to run an advanced filter. We're going to use this as the criteria, and then we're going to place the results right here in T1 all the way here. And we can do that with an advanced filter, just 3 sections of it. So we can do that in 3 here. Now we're going to run our advanced filter right here. So the range of the import sheets 1, that's going to be our A1. We're starting our advanced filter. We're going to go all the way to the last import row in the last column. That's our original range right here, which is right here. So we're going to take all that data. So starting in 1, cell 1, row 1 here, column 1, row 1. Going all the way down here, going to run the advanced filter. So that's what that first section does. It runs the advanced filter. So we scroll over here, we see the advanced filter, and we're going to copy that. We want to copy that to another section. We're not going to filter it in place. The next part is the criteria. What is the criteria? Well, again, it's going to start in row 1, and it's going to end in the total import columns plus 2. That's going to be the last column for criteria. And then we're going to go all the way in just to row 2 again with the total import columns. That's going to give us our criteria. Basically, all we're telling VBA to do is look for our criteria and look for it right here. Starting in row 1 all the way to the last column and going to row 2. So we're going to tell it this is our criteria. So whatever's in here is our criteria. Okay, that's for the second part. Remember, the first part is our source data here. Second part is our criteria. Now the third part of our advanced filter, we're going to tell it to copy over right here. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to move one column over and then paste our results right here. So that's the third part of our advanced filter, and that comes in our third line right here. Copy to range. Where do we want to copy it to? I want to multiply the total import columns by 2. Means I want to move it 3 times the original columns over, and then add 2, just so we add that, give it a little space. That's the first part all the way to columns times 3. That's just going to give us our full range and unique true. So all we're doing with this line of code is saying that I want the results to show up right here. That's it. Now, as soon as we run that, our results are going to show up right here. What do I want to do next? The next thing, I want to determine the last row, and I want to take this entire range, starting at right here, and determine what is the last row of the value. So we're going to use a lookup and look up the last row so I know what the last row is, but we don't know what column. It could be this column, because it could be missing data theoretically. So we need to use lookup. We can't use `xlf because that's for a specific column. But what if we have a range? If we have a range like we do here, we still need to find the last row of data. So we can use the next line of code, which I'll go through right now. The last source row equals range. We're going to base it on a range. Starting in row 1, the total import times 2. So this is our starting point. What is that? That's our starting point is right here. This is our starting point. Now we have to tell it our ending point. Actually, I'll just skip like tons of rows down, our last column, and then we'll go to like 999. So basically, it's going to look up this big range and say, okay, what's the last row with a value in that range? So here's the second part. Our first part of that range is here. In this case, it's T1. And then our last is the last column. Here's the row, the last possible row. I just chose a large row here. And then the last column. So that is going to get us our range. And what are we looking for? We're looking for any value using the wildcard after what? After the specific cell. In this case, it's T1. This is T1, right? So which is row 1 and then those columns. Total columns times 2 plus 2. Basically, all that is going to do is get us to this point right here. So that's our starting point. We're starting to look for the last row. We're not starting it at down here. We're starting it right here. I want to start here. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to look in the part, and we're going to look in formulas, and we're going to search order the direction previous, match case false, and this is going to get us the last row. That will determine our last row of data based on a range. Then, if the last source row is less than 2, then go to no source data. If there's no data at all, if, for example, in this case it's 3, but what if it's less than 2? That means there was no data. There's no criteria, no matching criteria. So in that case, I want to make sure we don't go forward with copying anything over because there actually is no data to copy over. Okay, so in that case, if it's less than 2, go to no source data, which is going to skip all of this and go to right here. So it's going to skip everything else because everything else, all we're going to be doing is copying that over. Now we have the source row. Now we know it's greater than 2, and I want to set the first source data row as 2. Why are we setting the first data row as 2? Because we know our first data is right here, 2. Right? We always know it's going to be there. We don't know the last one's in a variable. We know the first one's going to be in 2. So we want to set that into a variable, the first source row into a variable. The next, the source column. I want to know the source column is going to be, we don't know it's dynamic, so that's going to set our first column. In this case, it's column T, right? But this is the variable for it. Total import columns times 2 plus 2. It's the same one we used here, total import columns. Same one here. So that is basically right here, because it's not always going to be. Maybe it'll be, it depends on the number of columns. If you have 20 different columns in your source data, of course, it's not going to be. So that's why it's always in variable. It's not always going to be T. But in this case, it is because we have these specific columns. So we have that. Now I want to know the first source column. So we have that, and also, of course, the last source column. So the source column is here. That's going to be the first source column from the filter results. Now we're ready to copy over the data and the formats. So we'll set the table column to the first destination. This resets the initial table column to the first destination column. That's important. And then for the map column, 65 to the last map column. You may remember this. We have to go through this. Let's take a look at this. We have to go through our map data and start copying over. So it starts at 65 and it goes all the way down to the last one. So we need to run a loop because I want to copy over all the data and then the individual formats into our destination, because our new destination is going to have specific date formats, specific purchase formats. So we need to copy column by column and then set those formats accordingly, column by column. So moving on, so we run a loop for that. So we're going to run this loop and do all that. For each column, we're going to go through and add the values and then add the formats, unless the user has said do not import. If for some reason do not import, we're not going to import that column. So as long as G doesn't have that, then we can continue on. The destination column is going to be O in the map. That sets our destination column that we've already had in O. If you remember correctly, it's way over here in O. This is our destination column. So we went over that when we mapped. That didn't change. That's just going to tell us what in our destination, what column we're going to have column 1, 2, 3, in case we want a destination column perhaps to start on a different column. So we need to keep track of those. All right, so we have our destination column. And now we can copy over the data. Range, the destination workbook, this is the same as before. We're copying it over, but we're copying it over from a different source. We're bringing in this destination, all of this destination, the first available row, the last source row, and all this, but we're bringing it in, that didn't change, we're bringing it in from the source data. Now we're bringing it in from the import workbook sheets temporary data. That's where it's coming from, the last source column. So that's going to get us the last row, and the range starts with the temporary data, the first row. So all we're doing in this row is we're taking column by column and we're copying the data over. In other words, we're doing this. We're bringing in right here, column, the headers are already there. So I'm taking it, starting here, bringing this over and bringing it right into here. And then we're going to move to the next one, bringing this over and moving it right into here. Then we're going to go, so we're looping through each column. All the columns here, and we're bringing each one in, and as we bring it in, then we're going to format it accordingly. So that's all we're doing in that loop. We're just in this line of code, this is actually one line of code here. We're bringing it in column by column. The next thing we do is add in the formats. As long as I in the map column does not equal blank, then we're going to set the format. What is I? I is our format. It tells us what we need to format. It's here. What do we need? If it's blank, it's general, but maybe we want to format the date or specific currency or percentage. So we need to know what it is to format. So that's here in the code. If it's blank, then the cell format equals general. Otherwise, do something else. Range, destination workbook, what does it equal? It equals the cell format. So the cell format is either general or it's whatever is in I. So it's either general or whatever's in I. So then we can just take that variable, whether it's a specific format or whether it's general, and put it right in and format that entire column. So what does that do? That formats this entire column, general. Here, if we drop this down, we'll see it. When we go into home, general, right? General, but what about this? This is custom. More number formats. You see, we take a look at this. We see that this is the exact format that we have already set in our mapped right here. So it brings that format in. Same thing with currency. If we take a look at currency, we will see, and we click on currency, it's automatically currency. Again, currency and general, and then markup percentage. So those formats are getting copied over in that line. We did go over that before. So all we're doing is copying either general or whatever's in I. That's the format that we assign to the entire column. Then we're going to increase the table column one by one. Why do we do that? Because we're moving on to the next one. We're starting at 65 and we're going down 66, 67, all the way to 72. So we're going through each of these columns, adding in the data and adding in the formats. And then the only difference is our data, our original data is coming from here now. But when there's filters, it's coming from here. When there's no filters, it comes directly from our source. So that gives you an idea of how we do that. And the rest is pretty much the same. So we increase the source column and the table column. And we just go through this loop for every single column or destination. else, what is else? That means there's no filters. Then we're going to copy it directly from our source. We went over this all over. All we do in here is go again through the same loop, except our source is coming from our source. If we take a look at this, our range source workbook source sheet name is coming from our source. Here it's coming from our import workbook temporary data. So that's basically the difference. Either we're taking it from the filter data from our temporary sheet, or we're taking it from the source. So that's basically it. And then as we move on, we're going to auto fit all the columns in this. So all that does in our destination is we take all the columns, we'll highlight it, and we just auto fit by double clicking. That's the same thing. We do that so because we never know, we never know, it might be like this. So we want to auto fit all the columns just by doing that. But that's in VBA, auto fit those columns. All right, so we've got that. That's what that does. Auto fit, we're going to save it. If the user has selected one, that means it's an existing workbook. Save it. If it's a new workbook and it already exists, we need to delete it. And then we'll set the destination workbook as a file destination. I commented this out just so we didn't close it, so I could show you the destination workbook automatically because I didn't want it to close, but you'll uncomment this out and then it would close automatically. The reason we're not saving it here is because we've already saved it right here. So it's already saved. So we didn't need to save it again. And then I just want to activate the import workbook. If there was a duplicate sheet, this message box would show up. Otherwise, we're exiting the sub out of it. All right, so that's it. Now I've done pretty much the same thing, almost the same thing in the dynamic workbooks. And I've also, we're going to go over it because it's almost the same. But again, here's our if, just so you know, if check for data filters. This is our dynamic. Remember, this we're going to loop through multiple workbooks. Again, we're going to check to see if there is assigned filters by counting the same one in F. And if it is, we're going to go through the same. We're going to clear the temporary data out. We're going to copy over the data from whatever our source is. The only difference is this is within a loop. This is within a big loop called next source object. It means we're going through every single file in a folder that meets the criteria. We did go over that last week on dynamic sources. So we had multiple sources. So the same thing, we've got that. I also added in the ability to move it. I don't know if we had that working yet. Move the source workbook if requested. So that's going to move it. What did I mean by moving the source? Well, if we have dynamic here in the source, dynamic, and we've selected, right now I have it to do nothing, but let's say we want to move files, we can move those dynamic workbooks to a specific folder. I'll keep it at do nothing for now. So that gives you an idea of exactly how we go about that. All right, so we have covered a lot. We've covered the ability to add data formats in, and we had the ability, we're going to count to see if there's values there. If there's values here, we know that the user has set a value. We also showed you how to dynamically display these button sets, and of course the button sets are also based on the format here. If it's a number, date, or currency, we're going to be showing the number types less than or greater than. If it's a text-based, meaning general, it's going to be starts with, ends with, or contains. So that gives you user ability to add in wildcards, either starts with, ends with, or contains, really easily just by clicking a few buttons. It makes it kind of easy, although it's absolutely not necessary. You could easily just as well add it in yourself, but it just kind of gives you an idea. Sometimes we forget the rules, so it's easy. Same thing with lesson. It's just a kind of a quick way. It's not necessary, but it kind of reminds the user how they can quickly set specific variables for filtering. If you do want an exact match, if you want only mustard here, you could just enter the exact match mustard, and when you click there, we'll make sure we have a source data. Let's remap. All right, so now we can run the import, and you'll see only those that are mustard would automatically come in. So we see temp data only the mustard here, and in our destination only the mustard. So that now only the mustard in our destination, of course that's multiple sources, so it's going to pull only those values that contain mustard. If you have an exact match, that works also in case we have exact match. All right, we've gotten over a lot of that. Now we're going to go through the workbook, and next week we are going to probably use save as a template, which means I'm going to add a different template. I'll have the ability to save. I'm not sure if this button will be here or up there, but perhaps it'll be somewhere there. I'll make sure it's around. And then we'll have the ability to make reoccurring. So we're going to have that too. Maybe more, depending on your suggestions. So that's going to cover us for the Data Import Manager. I appreciate you sticking with me on these longer series. I know they can get kind of complicated, but I believe that I want to show you to make sure you know how to customize these and see the possibility and the potential of Excel when we think a little bit outside the box, and we can make our jobs a lot easier and get the promotion and get those freelance jobs or create your own applications. Of course, in the mentorship program, we will be creating our own applications, and I'm going to show you everything from A to Z, including websites, how to create them, and how to put your products on the web and get that recurring and passive income so you stop trading time for money. So I can't wait to show that to you. That's coming up in just a few weeks. All right, thanks so much for joining us. I do appreciate your likes and shares and your comments, so keep it up. That helps keep these videos free each and every week. Thanks so much, and have a great day.